All right. Good evening, folks. I'm in a hotel, and it unbelievably the internet connection is probably worse than my house. So let me know if stuff cuts out. Thankfully, it's just text, so I don't believe that we're gonna be having any issues. I'm on my laptop, not a lot of screen real estate, so if I miss a hand going up, I think we're a pretty small group. So if whoever has a comment, please feel free to speak up. You guys probably haven't had a chance to check your email in the last few minutes, but I received the text, thanks Commissioner Shea, from Mr. Contreras regarding the philosophy of community policing, the update in the verbiage, and I think that's a good place to start, so everybody can take a look. And don't worry if you're not able to pull it up in your email. It's on screen here, and it is essentially the new changes that are tracked in this paragraph here. So it's not a lot, so I'll just read it. And if anybody has a comment, please feel free to speak up. So again, the text in red are the insertions and the edits that was submitted. So community policing is the affirmed public police strategy to achieve the department's mission. This community policing philosophy, just like the rest of the department's policies and practices, must recognize and affirmatively practice a new and transformative culture that will seek to intentionally repair and replace historic, toxic, and harmful systemic behaviors. It is a policing model in which officers recognize, include, and empower communities through building collaborative, transparent, honest, and trusting relationships with the communities they serve. It is a collaborative approach to policing, which embraces community-led and community-directed problem solving, and where officers are seen as part of the community rather than separate from it. It places a high value on problem-solving responses that are preventative in nature and not dependent on the use of the criminal justice system. I didn't spend a lot of uh, time kind of dwelling on the verbiage, but at least now I don't have any issues or see it as problematic. Obviously, I don't want to speak for the other uh, members of the police department. But those are just my thoughts on this. Anybody have any?
I think it sounds good, Steve.
I would add one word, and I would add in the last sentence you read, it places an high value on problem-solving responses that are preventative in nature and not solely dependent on the use of criminal justice system.
So let me add it and
solely.
See what people think.
Because there's some issues, as you well know, I want the criminal justice system involved.
Mm-hmm.
And quickly.
Any thoughts on this? Okay.
I see Mr. Farmer and Mr. Nesperos is having some technical difficulty. I just got an email from him logging on. So let's take a moment, take 5 or just take a moment. I would be interested in hearing from members of the department. I appreciate. Sorry, is it lieutenant or captain? I can never remember. Lieutenant Febble.
Oh, sir, yeah, it changes frequently. I'm acting captain currently, but I'll be back to lieutenant again here in a few weeks. So we'll just keep it lieutenant. Keep it simple.
Much appreciated. I wonder what Sergeant Manguy thinks. Sorry to call you out, sir. Just you're our resident expert today.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
sorry, Sergeant Manguy here. Do you want me to wait for the technical difficulties to be solved, or just start answering now?
I am solving it right now, or trying to solve it right now. Mr. Nesperos is in the audience and just trying to promote him to panelist. So I think you can go. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
236.1 in the Jacqueline and interview.
I apologize. I'm also listening in for a vice operation right now, so I got to defer for now.
I got you. No worries. There's Mike. Okay. I mean, if there is no objection to the language, I have no problem with it. I think it goes with the direction of where we hope our department to go, speaks to the sort of partnership between the department and the community. And Reggie's suggestion also makes a lot of sense considering a lot of what is also in this policy.
Okay, I just made a note to myself to just circle back with Sergeant Manga. I know he's kind of juggling a couple things right now with another operation. I apologize for having missed the last meeting. I think I looked through the document and saw areas that still need to be touched on. But before I just kind of go to where I think the discussion points are, does anybody have anything in particular that they wanted to discuss first and foremost? I guess I should have started with that.
I think the parts where I flagged or I had notes for were places where we had discussion. I know we went around a few times, some more about the issue of, staffing and the numbers on the CROs and projects. Perhaps the new sections, the portions about the rotation back to patrol,
Yes.
as well as the parts about collecting feedback we can turn to since there were some new issues.
Okay. Scroll to that.
And then we can turn back to our try to get back to our discussion about the numbers and then the notifications, which is where we really need to sort of figure out where we're going.
So tenure, is this one of the spots, the transfer? That's
Yes.
what you're talking about? Okay.
Yes.
So for the rest of the panel, I added verbiage here from Commissioner Shea. I'm like 99% sure that it was all it was sent to everybody, but I added it here inside. Lieutenant Falbo, I'm not sure if you had a chance to see the verbiage here, but everybody can take a look. It essentially just references the general order B4, and then it adds another component that says that transfers are disfavored unless they're the member's immediate supervisor concurs in the transfer out of the community policing assignment. There was one change that I made to Commissioner Shea's text, and that was instead of the Special Operations Commander, I made it the Special Resources Commander, which is consistent with the doc in terms of the commander for the CROs.
For a little bit of context, everybody, we had put into this section specifically where the first line of section 8, we had put CRO members shall commit at least 3 years in this position. Upon sort of getting this back, we were informed that shall is a violation of the MOU. And so where we went with instead is both a strong suggestion of how long we hope our CRO members to serve, as well as just a little bit of resistance and reminder about transferring out of the CRO assignment. I added that last sentence because I had thought, well, we definitely want the institutional knowledge that comes from being a CRO for a number of years. However, also recognizing that, well, sometimes it just is not working out and everyone agrees. And so perhaps having that concurrence with the immediate supervisor is a way to ensure that it's not just someone changing their mind, but really it's not working out. Just for a little bit of additional resistance to make sure that a honest effort is given in the assignment before someone tries to transfer out to patrol. Transfer out, which would send them to patrol.
And you know what I would say too, Jesse, probably is equally important to this part, which we've done a good job of reporting the correct policy, but is also the amendment to the CRO policy that it's an order of merit list. Like you have to interview for this position. Getting the most qualified candidate in the beginning will hopefully really prevent us really even having to exercise this section. So it's good that we bolstered that as well from a transfer list.
Yep, thank you for that additional context and reminder about that order of merit. Again, it's both sort of implicitly suggesting to those who are applying for the unit, it means a lot, and it is for those who are both earn it and deserve it and are well qualified for it, hopefully sending them the message that we really want you to be in it and that you'll stay. I don't want to write a policy that is an MOU violation, and so this is kind of getting as close to that as possible. Anybody have additional thoughts? And thank you, Sergeant Mangai went to go deal with that operation. Thanks to him, Mr. Farmer.
Yeah, hey, thank you for opening this up. I like the line about the minimum amount of time. I think that's good. What I would also like to see is a little bit more detail about that. Like, one of the big complaints is that CROs don't spend enough time in that same beat, that they get moved around or just pulled off a patrol to do that instead. So are we able to be more specific and say during that 3 years that they will serve at least 3 years in the same beat at 3 of those 5 years? And then, right now there aren't enough CROs to even cover every beat, let alone every NCPC within every beat. So since this is looking forward and, with the MOU being renegotiated next year, is any way to say something like they should also have like a minimum amount of hours required to do CRO activities? Because right now, if you look at the evaluations for the geographical policing program, they show that CROs only spend somewhere between 20-24% of their time doing actual CRO activities. So I don't know if we can be more specific about percentages of time doing CRO activities, as well as specifics about years spent in each beat, in each beat. That's my question.
I think there's a couple things to unpack there now. I do think that if we're going to address the tenure in a specific position or assignment to a specific beat, that's probably best included in this section. And maybe in what are people's thoughts in terms of the time spent on the assignment? There's a different section there where we have here where it talks about and we're floating ideas around reporting of activities out of the primary CRO role. If that component of what Mr. Farmer's comments is best addressed in that spot. Thoughts?
Can you scroll us to, I
Yeah.
think it's section 5 that talks about assignments to beats and neighborhood councils?
Here we are.
Yep. Now, I think this might get to, there's this section that talks about CROs with their specific beats and neighborhood councils. It does not say, sort of continuously assigned to the same beat throughout the years. But it does talk about in the second to last paragraph, being reassigned to a different beat or neighborhood council, or reassigned to a different department unit, and puts a little bit of resistance on the part of the department, or resistance to making that change. Second to last.
Over here?
Yes. Also, thank you for highlighting that other section that says the department's committed to keeping continuity of CROs assigned to a specific beat. But we have a little bit of resistance right around where your cursor is, that the department has to document the justification for being reassigned to a different beat,
Right.
and sort of explain the proposed benefit and impact. Generally, it's not quite that. It's not quite requiring them to be as part of a beat. It does put resistance so that the department has to be thoughtful about it if it's going to do it, as well as provide notification. To the extent that, Mr. Farmer, do you think that this gets us there, or we should go further?
I'm just reading it over right now. It does help being more specific about saying that they cannot be assigned to more than 2 neighborhood councils. That's good. But one of the problems is that, like it says in the paragraph above that one, CROs should not be assigned to more than 2 neighborhood councils. But oftentimes, I don't know exactly how many beats have more than 1 neighborhood council, but I mean, it might be close to like half of them. So, I don't,
I will also say that we had a discussion last time about how, when we're talking about staffing, the way our policy is written right now, the department has to commit a number of additional CROs above and beyond to really consider this fully staffed. Lieutenant Feppel, I think you had that number, and I'm trying to find it right now.
Yeah, it's this is a large discussion regarding logistics now with the current. Our department is now considered fully staffed at 712. That's nearly 100 less officers than when this was originally drafted. It definitely exponentially complicates the NC balance with the CROs. I have not seen any measured discussion regarding the increase of CROs. That we're currently staffing 8 for West Oakland and 8 for East Oakland. And so I believe if we're going to consider the drafting of considerations in this policy regarding staffing and logistics, we have to account for that 16 officer model for citywide approach.
Sorry, let me direct us to what I found the note, which is right now we have 16 as minimum adequate number, but with the policy changes in this document, I think you had quoted to us, we won't hold you to it, but it might take up to 25 to 31 to reach these minimum requirements that are of this policy.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, 31 would allow us to pretty much fully fulfill the obligations of this policy. So, but I just don't foreshadow that being an option for several, if not many more years. So I hope we consider that.
Would it be helpful to discuss and put in this policy kind of like the ideal number, or like the ideal situation in which staffing is set, and then we can building from that talk about the various conditions that affect or given different conditions that affect staffing, in turn put conditions in policy that kind of address that. Like if staffing falls below, top staffing, then there should be a commitment to keep CROs in position unless XYZ, or so kind of we're addressing it if it were ideal and fully staffed, and then adding conditions or contingencies if it falls below, that help kind of govern how the staffing goes when it's not ideal.
I think that's a good point, Steve. I think one of the things that, personally, having done the CRO job for over a decade, I think the worst thing that we could do is to not serve NCs. Like, I think every NC should have the availability of a CRO to them. But with that, we have to thereby reduce the amount of mandatory tasks for each CRO to meet that community need. And that's going to be probably the largest conversation at LIFT that we're going to have to make. Do we serve all NCs, which I believe we should? But then in looking at that, how much time does the CRO have weekly? And we have to make sure that this policy reflects the amount of time a CRO has, and it makes the job tenable under this policy.
Yeah, I got a question for Lieutenant Febler, Lieutenant Toribio, Jesse. At an SSOC meeting a couple of months ago, one of the people from Urban Strategies said that they had been told that CROs weren't getting pulled to conduct patrol anymore, and that it wasn't that 20 to 24% of time that they're only doing for CRO activities. Has that changed? Has that number gone up?
I personally, sir, and the CROs tend to work geographically for their area and the area's needs. I know for a fact that my CROs out east, at least 75% of their time is spent on community resource projects. And for 2023, I have not sent them to patrol one time, with the exception of this week, where we had it's been an extremely challenging time for the community with over 10 homicides in 9 days. I've had to redirect them for a violence prevention program in the area of 150 needs. That's the first time this year I've had to do it. By and large, they have been working on NC projects and special needs outside of patrol.
Okay, but by and large, you're mostly just referring to your CROs out east. Is that correct? Or are you speaking for all of them?
No, correct. Out west, I know Sergeant Manguy could speak in more detail regarding them, but I can highlight some of their work. They are very heavily involved in operations regarding illegal cabarets, human trafficking operations, and nuisance abatement property operations, as well as unhoused encampments. They spend a lot of their time on that. And also for them, I know in the latter half of 2022, 50% of them were relegated to patrol because they were having significant staffing issues at that time. But subsequently, that's changed since their numbers, when they were doing that in 2022, they were at about 12 CROs. They've been reduced to 8. So they spend a vast majority of their time back on community-based projects.
Okay, so do you think that you could commit to saying that all of them can do a minimum 75%, like you said, or you or Lieutenant Febble said that you're able to do currently? Is that reasonable?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because the original doctrine of Measure Y, it actually had that in there, that CRO shall spend 80% of their time on their respective beat, is what it said. But what they actually found was that just because of so many protests and other ancillary assignments, and officers actually even working together, because they used to have one officer per beat, which was wonderful. But the community wanted their officer on their beat, and that's fully understood. And so it was actually doctrine for 80% of the time. And they just found that it just wasn't an expectation that they could hit. And so Measure Z got rid of that language What that magic number is, sir, is highly debatable. It would certainly take some research.
Can you, before I take dozen curiously to interview, can you scroll us up to page 4, right above number 3, right there, where that paragraph goes towards the discussion and where we got to. We never had a discussion about percentages, but certainly we put in a strong suggestion against drawing CROs away from their assigned duties and beats.
Yeah, I think this also, so I would imagine, I don't know, I sent him a text, but he's obviously really, really busy with the operation. But I would imagine that Sergeant Mangai's crew, the operation, they're not all working independently on an operation on their respective beats. They're working on something that's problematic on one of the beats, I would imagine. I don't know the operation, but it's not enough for one officer to handle. So they're pooling the CRO resources to address kind of like a serious problem. So, you know, how that counts, right? So technically, you know, maybe I'm the beat 1 guy, but I'm helping on a beat 2 project for this operation that's taking all day. I mean, I'm contributing to a CRO project, but it's not a CRO project on my beat. So that's just something to consider as well. And DQ, I don't know if I cut you off or what.
No, I was just going to add, I guess, to both your things. I was the CRO commander for BFO 1 last year. I know we were struggling last year. The goal that I had as the commander for CROs was I was keeping the officers on their respective beats to answer calls for service, and then I was moving the assigned officers on those beats to cover the open beats, if that makes sense. So like if you look at BFO 1 with the 22 beats, let's just say hypothetically you had CROs 1 through 7, I would keep the CROs in their assigned beats, and then I'd move the other beat officers to the assigned beats, if that makes sense. So that was one of the things I did. I can't tell you what the percentage of time that was last year, but I know we were struggling. Like if you look on average, it's 150 to about 175 calls standing for service right now, with probably always around 10 priority 1s. This year though, I am in the criminal investigation division and just monitoring the radio. I can't say for probably not even one day that the CROs have been pulled to assist with patrol. I think the biggest thing now that they're dealing with is you have a lot of city council members obviously reaching out to the chief of police and to Deputy Chief Beer saying, hey, these are the concerns, these are the issues. And then as a team, they're getting gravitated and pulled together, obviously kind of like how you explained it, to work on one specific issue. So a lot of the gambling casino shacks that are occurring in beat 18 and beat 19, they're working as a team on those long-term assignments. So it might be that they are getting pulled away from those specific areas, but they're all working for one specific mission because they don't really have a choice but to do it that way.
Thank you. Let's see. Mr. Farmer, Omar, are you complete on everything that you had discussed previously?
Yeah, we didn't really get a resolution to a percentage of time or anything. We heard a lot of information about what they are doing when they're not doing CRO activity, and a little bit of history, which is nice to know. But you know, I'd like to see a concrete commitment. There's always going to be additional things going on, or other priorities, or things like that. You know, regardless of you know, what's going on in the state of the city. So, you know, the people of Oakland have paid, you know, their taxpayer dollars for this geographical policing strategy to be executed how it's written, or at least, you know, to be effective somehow. And, you know, without a commitment to them actually doing the CRO activities, regardless of whatever else is going on, And I understand that sometimes some things supersede everything. I get it. But overall, there's some sort of commitment. This is what the taxpayers are paying for. So that's what I would like to see.
Let me, based on the discussion, ask you then a little bit. To the extent that you're thinking of some sort of percentage, my first question is, what is that percentage? And then the second question is, to the extent that there is a percentage, is it on their, what is the scope? Is it on their beat? Is it on CRO projects generally? What is the scope, if you can think, if you have one in mind?
Yeah, ideally, I just would have it, the scope would be to CRO activities on their assigned beat. How much time are they going to commit to that group for their activities? And it sounded like it might be reasonable to say 75%, because I asked the department, hey, what are they doing? And that's what they had said, at least about the officers in the East, which was great to hear. So it sounded like that might be reasonable. It sounds like it was reasonable in the past if they put that in to Measure Y, and yeah, maybe they changed their minds to not commit to it due to some other reasons back then. But it sounds like that even back then, 10 years ago, it sounded reasonable. So it seems like it should be reasonable now.
Would you support a so there are two ways to do it. One is a mandatory requirement of a percentage of time. The other is an aspirational with aspirational is one way. The other is mandatory with some sort of release valve, I guess is the way to say it, where it accounts for, say, emergencies, other projects, what have you. Do you have a feeling one way or the other?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. But it seems like their relief valve is already the MOU. The MOU will supersede everything. The MOU, how it's currently written, already gives them the power to pull CRO officers to do patrol or other situations that are deemed more more important. So
let me just turn to the department and ask them to confirm.
I would say that this is the aspirational portion. I think is absolutely reasonable. This would require some significant research in order to provide the panel an educated decision. Is certainly not something that I would say shoot from the hip on. We were unable to do it at the 80% when we had a full complement of 35 CROs, and now we're down to 16. So a lot of things would have to be considered.
One question I have is this another element for the percentage is this per week, per month, annually, over what span? So let's say there's a month of heavy riots, for example. Is it we're reaching kind of like the monthly point where it's problematic now pulling CROs, or is it something that is a little bit more forgiving if it's over something like annually, where we could use maybe projected incidents like major holidays or an election year when we're going to have that. So I'm just curious on over what time span that percentage is going to be looked at.
Why don't I get your thoughts about it, and then I'll get other thoughts about it.
Yeah, here's sorry to interrupt, Steve. No, one of the most immediate issues that would come. Let's say if the percentage is something that wants to be defined within the policy, there has to be cutouts for training, sick time, vacation, because the actual 80%, when we just took into account mandatory continuous police training, mandatory trainings, as well as vacation, sick time, and accrued leave, the 80% right there already couldn't be accomplished.
We can do that.
So there would have to be a carve out for that right out the gate.
We're drafting right out. We're brainstorming how this might work. So I appreciate that. Let me first get first get Lieutenant Toribio's thoughts on sort of that, what is that the time frame, and then I'm gonna go to Mr. Lyles.
Gosh, it's been years since I worked. Well, it was PSO back then. I think, and I'm just kind of stream of consciousness here, but I think it's probably easier to evaluate if it were like a monthly thing. That's just offhand, but kind of ease of calculation. I don't know how heavily that should just weigh into what's appropriate. I think that obviously the shorter the time span, I think it's more favorable for the community to kind of see that, right? If they got 75% of their day, they're with me, versus I don't see them for 2 weeks, but overall through the year they've been here 75% of the time. So from the community standpoint, I think a smaller time frame would be better, but I don't know just logistically how, if that's the most appropriate response. And I'm sorry, I wish I had a solid answer.
That's okay. The way I see it, we have weekly, monthly, every 2 months, every 3 months, all the iterations up to a year. And so just think about that for a sec. Why don't I take Mr. Lyles?
Yeah, I think I know what is desired, but crime just doesn't function like that. And for example, if you have a period of a crime wave where you having high priority calls away from someone's beat, and a citizen or an officer is injured, a 940B, you don't want someone to say, I'm gonna, you got to stay on your beat. You can't go off your beat. I think for me, the best we could get is that we have a target and we try to hit that target. But if crime calls or people need service or whatever, they have to respond, and they should respond. And that would increase, I think, the perception of safety. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I would be, if I was working the beat and I needed some help, and the community beat officer could not get off his beat because they want to maintain a statistic, that would break down that cohesive dependence that officers have to have on one another when you are responding to crime issues. I mean, that's just how it goes. Some days nothing happens, and some days everything happens. It's just so unpredictable. But if we have a consistent time where this officer, community policing officer, is never on his beat, then we need to know why he was taken away, and that's up for the management team to articulate that, and they better have some good reasons for that.
So I think it sounds like you're advocating for an aspirational percentage as a target, maybe not a hard requirement, that there would be probably a longer period of time that percentage would be evaluated on, because crime comes in waves. And so perhaps over a 6-month period or a year period, and but also some tracking so that either the department or the public can see where or what their CROs are doing and how much of that is on their beat, so that they have some sense of that.
I'm thinking like every 90 days, maybe a 90-day period, so we can get a good assessment of that. And then the CRO officer who is on their beat, they may need some help. And they may need some help, and they want everybody to come, now as quickly as possible. So that bond that officers have to have with one another, it shouldn't be tampered with. I know Oakland Police Department is still sending one officer to every call for service. Is that correct, officers?
Often it depends, sir. Anything where there is violent in nature, be it battery, be it a shooting, a stabbing, they're going to minimally send two. Any domestic related call, they're going to send two. Even if it's a dispute between a merchant and a customer, they're going to send two. Okay. It's very rare, actually, that they send one. Now, a cold report, somebody's car was stolen, right? Somebody got home. They'll send one officer.
What I'm thinking is that it's not only that we're trying to build up the citizens, the residents, the people in the community, their perception of safety, but the officers have to have their perception of safety also. They have to know that if I need some help, you're coming. And so that's how crime functions. But I wouldn't want anybody taken off the beat to do some non-priority one type function.
Sure. To give a little bit more context, and I know there are hands up, a little bit more context into officer response to calls. There's also policy and procedures that dictate response as well. So let's say, for example, there's somebody who fled from officers with a gun, and now they're in a yard. So no officer's been shot, but it's somebody who's with a gun. Or even if it's a robbery suspect, pick your kind of violent felony. Just per our policy, we're going to need to have an incident command structure set in place where we have minimum for a typical city neighborhood, 4 officers on a perimeter, minimum 4 officers, plus a 5th being a sergeant who's going to be part of the dedicated arrest team. We're going to have additional officers who are going to be maybe conducting a canvass, running intel, etc. So it's just the nature and the quantity of critical incidents, and we'll label that a critical incident if we're going to be evolving into a search team or even a dedicated arrest team. You can see just outright bare minimum for violent felon who fled from an officer. We have 9 officers there, and that's just bare minimum for that incident. So just for additional context on kind of patrol calls and the resources that they take.
Thank you. DQ, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say something, but Turbo, you kept talking, you made me forget. No, I'm just joking. No, I was thinking, and maybe this was in line with the other gentleman who just spoke. Forgive me, I forgot your name, but what about if it's
Lyle.
Mr. What's your last name?
Lyles.
I know we keep talking and we're talking about percentages and everything. What about if we go to tasks for the month and as opposed to percentages for the month? Like here's like specific tasks that we're asking for each CRO to produce within their beat or district. And here's your task and a reportable, every month or every quarter, however you want to do it, as opposed to a percentage. Because I'm like trying to think, how as an officer do I even say, because I can even go back thinking when I was in patrol, man, there'd be some times when I wasn't even in my beat because of the calls for service. And I totally understand too that we're talking about CROs, so it's a little different. but we kind of go where the crime takes us, unfortunately, sometimes. But also the CROs have a different job aspect too, where they're to help the community too and try to problem solve some issues and kind of work around things. So what about we think of tasks that we should be responsible for as opposed to percentages? Because I wouldn't even know how to quantify that, as opposed to saying, yeah, I was in my beat 75%. I mean, I can go on hours. I mean, it's just food for thought. I don't know. I'm just thinking.
We have something like that, but not quite that. We have parts about maintaining at least one project per assigned beat. I know that there's already a requirement of attending community meetings, the NCPCs. Those are some tasks. But also we also discussed a little bit the issue of, well, you know, when we go with numbers, sometimes a person can rack up a number of completed projects that are very simple, as opposed to sort of one giant massive project, which may have considerably more considerably more impact. That's an interesting thought, though. It's an interesting thought. Mr. Farmer?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that it just, hearing everyone's remarks, it just sounds like this whole policy is just aspirational. I really want to know what this is. OPD's geographical policing strategy. We've seen how things have played out the past 9 years or so since Measure Z is in place. And I just want to know, what is their plan to fully execute their strategy? How would they recommend doing it in this policy, and, you know, in accordance with this discussion about spending time on CRO activities? No one said that they couldn't go to a more important crime issue. I think we all agree on that. But what is their plan to execute this geographical policing strategy?
Well, I mean, I would say, sir, I think that Jesse brought up a good point, is that the tracking methodology is really in the accomplishments of the CRO on the projects and the tasks that they're given. And then the model for that is we use the SMART system in the SARA model, which tracks those. Now, the matter of the size and the scope of the project should be largely based on the community's needs, but the CRO will be responsible to report out on the quality and the progress of all of these projects and tasks that they're doing. And it will be very obvious to community members if the CRO is not spending time in their beat, because they're not going to accomplish anything.
Fable, I appreciate that. I don't think that's quite the question that Mr. Farmer asked, though.
I think as you know, the aspirational approach might be the only option, only because there's just so much uncertainty, and if there's a mandate, there's only so much that we can control. We can establish directives. We can set numbers, but at the end of the day, there's also there are other players in the game that really affect our response. I don't think that having an aspirational approach means that, you know, there's any less honesty in trying to accomplish what we're aspiring to do. I do think that it doesn't mean that we can't still be, accountable for measures that we try to set in the policy. I just think that given that there are heavy factors that are kind of out of control, we can only aspire, just to speak generally, and I'll equate it to just my position in patrol. I had the chief of police call me on the weekend, asking about the number of calls for service and what was leading to it, and I honestly don't have an answer aside from we only have so many officers and can only do so many things with the resources that we have. And I think that's tangentially applicable here to CROs. That's the best answer I can give for that.
Hey, thank you for the honest answer and direct answer. I appreciate that. My last question, Jesse, is just that what would the department recommend to do? Would you like to just see this policy be completely aspirational? And like you said, I'm not saying that just because it's aspirational that people aren't really trying to actually execute this, but I don't know how high of a priority all that depends. So, I mean, how would you recommend to accomplish it, the geographical policing strategy of the CRO's job, be written so that in a realistic way that it can be accomplished, so that we can say that we're actually doing everything we can to accomplish that strategy?
I think, for starters, where we talk about ensuring that that every beat is represented is one thing, and there are inherent problems with that, because then we have a CRO who's stretched pretty thin, but we're still committing to providing that geographic support to every beat. So things like that, I think that we can sort of mandate, and that's within our control. I mean, even if we were down to one CRO, well, that CRO is going to be held in some way, shape, or form accountable for working with every beat or every neighborhood council. So along those lines, I think we're talking about something different now. We can be a bit more mandatory in ensuring that there's representation for the beats, but I think it's just kind of like a different animal when we're talking about specific time, and I think that there just inherently has to be a bit more flexibility, and I think that's where we go a little bit more towards the kind of the aspirational side of things.
Reggie?
If I was the deputy chief and you guys work for me, I would be asking questions like this. Convince me that you're being effective. Convince me that your officer is being effective. Now tell me how you're doing that. Now, you may not can tell me, well, we've been on my SROs or CROs or SROs were on their beat 75% of the time. Well, are they effective? Is crime going down? Are the people satisfied? Is the perception of safety going up or down? Are the people in the neighborhoods will welcome me to come by and visit them randomly? And what would they tell me? See, I think some of this can be handled with some effective supervision. And the responsibility has to be laid on these lieutenants and sergeants to make sure the officers are doing what they're supposed to do. Now, I don't want to take away the inherent responsibility that you got to respond if there's a call for service and it's a Part 1 call and somebody's in a neighborhood and with a gun and all. I don't want to even touch that, because that's just not policing. But what you're supposed to be doing is making the people in the neighborhood feel like they have a input on crime strategies. Tell me how your people are being effective in that way. How are you measuring it? How many meetings have you attended? See, so maybe it's oversight and not just counting the time you're on the beat or the tasks you've done. What is the quality of the work you've done?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Lyles. That's there's a lot there. I think some of the questions they can be asked directly in relation to CROs, and I think also they're kind of more broader questions that involve the department as a whole, right? Questions regarding the effectiveness in making people feel safer. And I think that goes beyond CROs. It goes to patrol, it goes to our investigations, it goes to even our internal affairs, our violent crimes operations center. But specific to community resource officers, I think there are metrics laid out here in this general order that we're working on, such as, the projects, right? Project resolution and the we've talked about seeking input from the neighborhood councils on the effectivity of the CROs. So those are some avenues of information and feedback that can help establish the determination on the efficiency of or quality of work of the CRO. So I do think some of those things are here in the policy, and we're continuing to discuss those things.
See, again, I think it's about what the people in the neighborhood, how they feel about how they're being served. I think that's it. And counting numbers and all of that may not mean anything, but may look good on paper. But the people don't feel like they never see anyone. So it has to be more than that. It has to be, okay, if I go and knock on some doors and ask about the CRO, what would these neighbors tell me? Do they see your people around? Do they feel comfortable? Do your people listen to them? And then I would never bring up what you just brought up about, well, we got a problem with a number of officers, blah, 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 blah. Stop that. We got to work with what we got right now. And what we got right now, this is what we're doing. I don't think we'll ever have enough officers. I know when I was in law enforcement, I never thought we had enough.
Interesting discussion. Thank you both. Lieutenant Toribio, can you turn us to page 6 under section 6? I'm sorry to jump around you all, but I wanted to sort of get to this next point, which I think tracks along with what we've been talking about, which talks about, and I think we put this back in, about tracking other activities undertaken. And it looks like
I'm going to scroll over to your comment so people can
sure
see the comment here as well.
So from a community perspective, I think Lieutenant Toribio's note is quite apt about knowing where the CRO's time is being spent. At the last meeting, we talked a little bit about some of the technical aspects about how the city may move away from Saranet, getting to Lieutenant Febbles' sort of concern about having the CROs do less, or sorry, not having the CROs do so many more mandatory tasks that everything is taken up on those mandatory tasks. And a question, which was, do we want tracking or do we just go with notification? So I suppose, I don't know, I would like to try to sort of finalize this portion about how this policy is going to play out, and if it is going to have the effects that we want it to, which is kind of very relevant to the discussion that's going on right now. Thoughts? Okay, well, Guess it stays.
Yeah, as is, guys,
Yeah.
anybody have no issues with, or no comments on the verbiage as listed?
Yeah, I don't have any objections. Looks good.
What I would suggest is let's future-proof it. Is there, to the extent that we may be using something other than Saranet?
Yeah, I don't see the language here being an issue if we moved away from Saranet. Yeah, I don't see a problem with this verbiage.
I think you had I think in the other version that was right above it, you had put a parentheses or other current accepted project management website or software. That was the future proofing that I was thinking of.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I can include that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay. Let's see.
I'm gonna resolve this thread. Okay.
Let's turn to evaluations, which is section 9. Let's have a discussion about I think it's A2.
Yeah.
At A2 and whether or not A2 prohibits section 9 here, a little bit higher up on the screen. Thank you. So let's see. The previous language was evaluating supervisor shall collect, review, and incorporate community and neighborhood council input. I see from administrative DGO 8.2 the concern that was brought up, which was that all surveys made in the name of the department shall be authorized by the chief of police or a commander. We also heard some discussions about how input is happening now. Sergeant Mangai talked about it with us to let us know that there are often discussions with the neighborhood council that anything that is negative is absolutely captured. And when positive, they generally are sent by email or documented in some way. I do think that there is a difference between sort of passively receiving them as opposed to sort of collecting them and reviewing them. And I think that may be important in the evaluation of the CROs, although I certainly understand the thought of having it being evaluated by someone other than who is outside of your field, but that you may work with. I don't see A2 as being a bar, mainly because a commander can authorize the survey and a commander oversees the CROs. That's my thought about it. Do we want to talk about that before we talk about whether there should be mayor shall?
No, I think so. What I thought the issue was like the imposition of a metric in the performance evaluation that was specific to community input. And when I brought that up with somebody at the union, and they said that would be like a meet and confer thing if we're now changing like a metric. However, I think that if the verbiage just is clear, it's, so if I receive positive input from a community member, then the supervisor should be putting that in as a supervisory note. Hey, to review, I got a call from this citizen. He took a good report and was, showed a lot of empathy when he talked to me. Then the supervisor should be putting a note in my supervisory note file. and on the same along the same lines, if someone's saying, "Hey, you know what, Toribio," and this isn't a complaint would be different, but I just didn't feel that he did a good job. He ticked all the boxes, but he really needs to learn to kind of show some empathy. And I'm just kind of disappointed. I don't want to make a complaint, but I just feel compelled to let his supervisor know that he's not doing his job as well as I think that he could. Supervisor needs to be documenting that as well. Now, those supervisory notes then in turn are referenced in the performance appraisal in various sections, whether it's communication, whether it's community interaction, etc. So in that sense, it's not a problem at all, as I understand, in terms of like a meet and confer or union issue. But setting a separate evaluation metric could potentially be problematic because it would need to be a meet and confer thing. So perhaps rewarding here might be that supervisors shall input community feedback in a supervisory note file, something along those lines, or supervisors shall refer to relevant supervisory note files when conducting evaluations for CROs or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure. Whatever we kind of determine here, though, I'll be sure to run it by somebody from the union and see if it's going to be an issue.
Appreciate that. Thoughts, rest of the ad hoc?
So let me change this back to shall.
Yeah.
Run it by the verbiage as verbatim to folks in the union and see if they're interpreting this as something that would be out of the scope of something we could apply if it would be a meet and confer thing.
If I may, I would then also suggest that the portion that talks about the collecting, review, and incorporating input into their evaluation of CROs perhaps is reworded to go along with standard practice, such that it's shall collect, review, and incorporate community and neighborhood council input into the supervisory note files, perhaps, and then be used in their evaluation of CROs so that it's in line with existing practice. The difference is instead of passively receiving, it's actively trying to solicit.
I know this is maybe kind of choppy verbiage, but I wanted to get the idea down, and then I'll take a look.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Just gonna finish this note. Okay.
Before we turn to section 3, which are specific responsibilities, which tend to generate the most discussion among us, I wonder if anyone of the ad hoc has other sections of the policy that they have since thought of that they wanted to discuss. DQ?
Yeah, real quick. Is there a section? I want to say I'm going off my phone here and off memory. Wasn't there a thing on cell phone usage or returning calls?
There was, and it was, I think, adjusted to make sure that it took into account off days, vacation days, leaves, or trainings. It's not number 4.
Had to do the section on just the responsibilities, right? So it might be
I
higher
want
up.
to like page 5 or something. I can't remember.
Check email and voicemail messages each regular workday and respond within a reasonable time. CRO shall use beat-specific email addresses for all communication-related issues in community policing beats.
I think that's fine. Maybe I read it wrong then. Is that the only part?
Now,
The
there's
only-
also the section 4, which talks about use and auditing the Sarah net database that
No,
we
that's fine.
included
No, I
absence.
know. We
vacation training.
talked about that.
Yeah.
But as far as responding back to calls, I think that's the only one, right? Maybe I read it wrong then. Okay, I'm fine.
Let us know if you find it.
Okay.
There was something different topic about like blight addresses, and I was supposed to check with Febble, and I didn't get a chance to. An issue about possibly
Section K, that is 3K. 3K.
okay. Here we go. Identify properties associated with neighborhood problems, calls for service, crime, blight, and nuisance, and institute projects to address these problems. So I need to just look at the actual comment so I can not screw it up. Bill, as far as you're aware, any issue like privacy concerns or redaction issues if this is instituted here?
I mean, we get to choose what we get to report out on, but I do believe it is in the best interest of the CRO to identify the most problematic properties on the beat. Whether they fall within 11,570 is another concern. And the only other thing that I do find a little bit up for discussion with that is that what I found is that usually when we talk about nuisance properties, more often than not, that's actually what the CRO wants. It's like a department, desire. When if you talk to community members, they might recognize that particular residences or properties may be a problem, but it's not the biggest problem that they have, and they don't often want the CRO to spend all of their time on a nuisance property that they don't feel is a priority in their community.
Assuming it is, though, like assuming it is, like let's say it's universe. Like, is there any issues with in like presenting it either at a community meeting or notifications? Hey, the residents at 123 Happy Street is causing all these problems, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. Any issues just with either publication or in presentation of mentioning specific addresses in relation to labeling it like a blight location or a nuisance house or something like that, either at a public meeting and,
Right. No, right. So long as we do not use names, we can technically use property owners' names. I don't recommend it, but we can because it's public information. So the answer to that is no. We if the community wants to know the statistics on a particular property, we can provide that.
Okay, so no issues with this verbiage as listed. Can I close this or resolve this comment, assuming everybody else is okay?
Yes,
This clause?
absolutely.
So I recall something about maybe like family that has a mentally ill kid or young adult or older, which is an adult, and it generating a lot of calls for service, or maybe something involving domestic violence between a family. I remember that portion as being potentially an issue. How do we resolve that?
That's a great point you bring up, Mr. Shea. Nuisance properties really don't fit under the law with regard to people who are experiencing mental crisis or significant calls for service for medical issues.
I agree that it says calls for service.
Yeah, like what if it was the case though, Bill? Like what if, or it just becomes a priority for the council? Like, you know what? I understand this family, they have, you know, a child or children with special needs, but you know, gosh, they're screaming all the time, and you know, they want to make that like a priority. Like, is that become problematic? Or like, you know, I'm tired of this couple. They're constantly fighting. I'm hearing, you know, stuff break, and I know that he's hitting her, and police have been out there a bunch of times. I think that's what the commissioner was maybe referencing. And if that becomes now problematic, if in
for the department to reveal,
yeah,
to talk about, right?
So the department would have to narrow the scope of the conversation to specifically the location and the calls for service, because that's open to public records requests. That wouldn't be redacted. So the CRO would have to have an inherent knowledge of redaction and what information would be inappropriate to speak about. And in situations like that, there would be a lot that would be inappropriate to speak about. But you could talk general. This is the location. These are the calls for service. And these are the resources available for us to abate the problem. It would have to be very high level.
Okay, so it doesn't, like, it's just understanding the specifics of what we can and can't talk about, but the identification of the property isn't going to be an issue. Is that what I'm getting?
Absolutely. And this actually went into the old conversation of why we can't release specific access to SaraNet, because that reveals a lot of legal implications and names of people that should not be known to the public.
Got it. Okay, team. So having that information, does this verbiage satisfy? One, does this satisfy what we want to address? And then two, understanding that there can be complications just from the department side. Is this something that needs to be addressed in policy, where it's, you know, CROs should be mindful of X, Y, Z, just to safeguard the department?
I think this gets at the community side. The original said open projects for these 3 locations, but we had a discussion about thinking, well, even if that may be the case, that may not be the projects that are, but I may not be the specific properties. I just want to make sure it does identify properties associated with neighborhood problems and institute projects. Is that a call out, like a shall for the CRO to do? And is that what you want?
Bill, any thoughts? I mean,
I think shall,
you say, hey, let's
no,
just
I wouldn't
do
say
it, right?
shall, because I think that there's certain you bring up a good point.
I'm not asking if we should put in shall. So let me just be clear. I'm asking if it already says that.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Is it implied that
Yeah.
it's a mandatory task?
Think about that
Yeah.
as we're running out of time, as we're dwindling down. And then I think we'll come back to this, and then we'll finish up the specific responsibilities, because I think that is the last sections that we need to sort of resolve. Commissioner Howell couldn't be with us today due to being on another ad hoc. And so I didn't want to be unilaterally making decisions if I needed to.
Okay. I got that in there.
Group, is there anything else that we want to sort of think about or bring up before we come back to our next meeting? I'm going to try to sort of get us to a point where we can sort of get finality and sort of make decisions on some of these things. Lieutenant Toribio, I think you and I separately will likely go through and see what is resolved and what is not, and then try to drill down next time on what is still left to be resolved.
Hey, DQ, you have anything?
Right.
Nope, nothing.
Okay, sorry. So I saw your hand up, but I haven't been looking at the Zoom window a lot. Okay, so just so everybody has this document, as soon as the meeting ends, I'll just push it out to folks, and then I'll work on the follow up that I need to work on and touch base with everybody. I'm sorry. Do we have the next meeting scheduled already or no?
Not yet. Not yet. Still open. Just do me a favor, scroll up about half a page or a little bit less. Yeah, so I just want to direct everyone's attention in the ad hoc. The next things that we need to decide. Number one, the reporting process to the neighborhood council, which is on the screen. And then number two, just a little bit more, Lieutenant Turbio.
The beat
projects and numbers and beats, etc. I'd like to really drill down and have a real conversation about numbers if we can to get to that point. And because I know these are the two pieces that generated a lot of discussion, and I'd like to resolve them so that we can move forward.
When I send out the email, in the body of the email, I will list these 2 points just so people who aren't here can know to focus on those things.
Much appreciated.
Mhm.
Been trying to keep these on Thursdays. The looks like either the 21st of September or the 5th of October. Anyone have thoughts?
Personally, I prefer to have it sooner than later, just so we can try to get this policy into effect.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. October seems pretty far off.
Sure does. Sure it does. Okay. Any objections to September 21st then, 6 to 7:30?
Right.
DQ, your hands up.
I'm on my phone. My hand does not want to go down. I'm so sorry.
Okay. All right. September 21st, 6 p.m. to 7:30. Thank you all for taking the time. I know, long process. I never do anything quickly. Oh, sorry. Hand went up. Anybody? Sergeant, is that Sergeant Manguy? Do you wanna let us know something?
He might be off. He's on a takedown. They just arrested a couple people in an operation. So
Okay, so completely different panelists then. All right. Okay. Well, I'll have Kelly send out the invites and the notes, and we'll go from there. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
good night.